Morning. Welcome to today's webinar. It's going to be focusing mostly on looking at the potential of data and looking at Nebu's new program, the Nebu Data Hub. The webinar will take roughly 40 to 45 minutes, and there'll be a Q&A session at the end of that. You can obviously ask questions during the webinar on using the interactive panel on the side there, and we'll pick up those questions at the end and go through them. So, the Nebu Data Hub. What the Nebu Data Hub is basically a response to the amount of data, the sheer volume of information that is available nowadays, and how market research can actually manage and cope with that amount of data, manipulate it, put it all together, collect it, alter it to their own particular needs, and in a way get more insights into the research process they're conducting, but obviously using a tool which will optimize that flow of information, make the whole process of managing, merging data sets and publishing that data out in a more effective and efficient manner. So why are we looking at sort of delivering this data hub system? Well, as we've seen, data is growing exponentially. I'll show you some figures on that in a little while, but we all have heard things about the Internet of Things, the amount of devices that are available, that are online, that are connected, and how that data is being fed back into massive servers. The growth rate is incredible just on the sort of the aspects and the amount of figures that are supposed to be put together on there. Also, the relevance of data. It's becoming more and more time specific. People are looking at when this data was collected, were there any influences and factors that affected that at a specific time, which maybe accounts for differences in either response rates or average scores, NPS feedback, things like that can really be altered by when something happens and what influence factors there. And also the expectation of now. We live in a society that is continuously on. Everyone expects that information is readily available at the fingertip, and that expectation feeds through to every industry and every process that is happening. So every day we say that the surrounding changes, the stream of information needs to be updated continuously. If something changes, it can change the whole aspect of the research you're doing. We've all seen examples in the past of recommendations being given to supermarket chains or different retail stores to adopt different positions, and then the next day one of their competitors will go bankrupt, and it changes the whole aspect of exactly where they should position themselves and who their competition is. So time is very, very important now. So just looking at some of the data growth here, and we used to talk in sort of megabits and think that was a huge amount, but we're up to sort of terabytes and zettabytes, and just the sheer number and volume of people and devices that are connected. I've seen predictions saying that nearly sort of 6 billion people will be online by 2020, and the amount of sort of devices connected there is going to be around sort of 30 billion. And so we're talking about sort of 36-40 billion devices and people that are going to be feeding information in continuously. Just sifting through that amount of information and finding what's going to be crucial for us is a process in itself. But then we're looking at the different data sources come in. We've got naturally the survey data that comes in, there's government statistics, the social media, so Facebook and different groups that are working there, or internet messaging through WhatsApp, the digital fingerprints that are processing everything you're doing, or your customer information, loyalty and store cards that are feeding that in, the eye tracking aspects on there to see how emotions going on. We've got Experian and Acorn data to all enhance the data you've got there from panels and samples, even wearable devices, geolocation, all these things that are pushing information into what we're doing, how our process is working, and we've got to try and find from all these different sources that key information to enhance exactly what we're trying to sell, the message we're trying to give out, and our insights. So we're looking at then the Data Hub. I mean, it holds and stores all the collected data there. The way it works is, or the way we look at it working is on the collection side of things. Your survey data from every different survey can be pumped back into a data repository. And obviously you can have the sort of connectors to other data sources. So we can connect to the sources we said, the government statistics, connect to Facebook feeds, Twitter feeds, and finding out sort of the keywords that you can then try and flag on time principles and see if that affects it, and start doing some analysis based on all the information. And it's obviously going to be in a continuous real-time flow, rather than having it sort of as a static data that's in a database that you're using. The data will be pumped in or pulled in at the time that it's needed, the time it's requested from any of the users. So it keeps it up to date in the instant. So if we're looking at data flow, what we're looking at really is a sort of a data hub where surveys, social media, and government data, as examples, feed into the data hub there on an automatic process. You build the connectors once, and you're pulling in that information continuously. So once you've got the information in there, then we start having to look at what we're exactly going to do with that information, with that data. It's all very well sort of collecting sources together, but as we know, a lot of times the information can be in a very different format. Might need to be sort of remapped so that, for example, M and F used for the gender indications, or 1 and 2 in a different study, or whatever it might be on those classifications, are mapped in together and merged, so that when you are looking at multiple data sources and trying to find a common thread in there or commonality among the variables, you need to be able to sort of manage that data, find out how it is, and extract the parts of the data streams that you may want for particular purposes. So if we're looking at it, the Data Hub, it sounds as though it could be just another database, just something there. Well, in essence, we could say, yes, it is another database. It does store collected data. It's pulling in all of your survey information. It's holding it in a single repository there ready for you to use. It works in the way that you can actually export your data. So, you've got your data set there, you decide what to do with it, you can export it and push that out and use that in other systems and other programmings. And it does contain some static information. Once that information has been collected, say survey information, you're not going to ask that survey information again. It's static in the database, it's not moving. So in some ways, yeah, it is a large database on there. However, if we look at the other side on that, and the extra things it does, some of the data is not held in the Data Hub. Any of the information connectors to outside sources is only done in real time. So the connection is available continuously. The connection to the outside source will look at pulling in that data on demand, pulling in the information you require at any specific time. But in that external source, if it changes and is updated, that will change and update when you pull it, when it's required. So you're no longer sort of holding all of your data in one place, in one sort of static time field. And having that data pulled in real time is the key to gaining that sort of time-based insights. Looking at what things have changed, seeing if there is any extra information there. And if you can imagine, Twitter feeds on that, they're continuously changing. So getting that information in real time into your data, see if anyone's mentioning a product, an advert, seeing what's being said about it. That can obviously influence how questions are answered. And so you want to be able to measure that, measure the impact of any sort of campaigns that may be running, any buzz that's happening in the sort of the greater, wider world. And obviously that means then your information is dynamic. It's no longer that static collected, it's continuously changing. That reflects the continuous changing movements within the sort of global world that we live in. So yeah, whilst it is a sort of, in essence, a database there, what we are looking at is making sure that it just works in an optimal fashion. It collects and manages data and merges it together. So if we're looking at sort of, just a quick screenshot of what the Data Hub is going to be sort of looking like for you, and the products out there, you'll see that we're looking at sort of various different projects we have, different data sets within our database. And some of those are sort of held in there. They're data sets that are pulled in the example we're showing on the screen here. This was based on a presentation we did to Casro, and you can sort of see that presentation on the Casro website. Download it through there. But we were looking at a survey based on sort of people's opinions of the latest Brexit thing that's going on in the UK at the moment, and so we had a survey data that was feeding data into that, whether people considered leaving or not, how strongly they felt about it, and capturing their postcode. And then using that, we had a sort of a feed in on the postcode coordinates. So with everyone's postcode, we could set what geolocations were contained within that postcode region, and then you'll see there's sort of a red indicator there, a derived data set. And that derived data set was really then merging those various different databases into one derived set. And that's quite an important thing. It means that any sources you're bringing in, you can then create a new data set for specific use, for sort of various different reports you can generate from that based on multiple different data sets within in the Data Hub. So you've really got the ability there to merge various different data, confirm it, be flexible with it, and change sort of what you can do in your Data Hub. That full sort of management of the information coming in. So looking at the derived data on there, as we said, data sets can be merged, create new data. You can derive them from multiple sources, and that could be any of the feeds that are coming into the data set, any of the data that you've got static within there as well. Anything that's coming in, you can just sort of produce those multiple sources together and map them together to make sure that you can report on them and have them updated continuously. It's not a sort of one import, one utilization, and then sort of find your way from that data. It's always going to be up to date. It's always going to be relevant for you. Additionally, inside the hub as well, we have sort of an embedded R language on there now. R language is sort of, for those that don't know, it enables you to be able to perform calculations on any of the data that you have within that database. It will be able to be sort of used to manipulate any of that data. So the binding of various different codes that mean the same thing from different data sources, and change and manipulate them for how you want to process that data as well. And this all sort of calculations can be triggered all time based on there as well. So you can have one event triggering the running of such sort of calculations, management of data in there, or you can have it on a specific time. So every X amount of days, perhaps recalculate ages based on birth dates every day at a certain date time there. So there's sort of multiple sort of triggers and capabilities within the R language to be able to manage the data that you have within your data sets there. R language is an open source language in there as well. It's very widely developed. It is in most industries overtaking SPSS as the default analysis tool in there as well, but it has much more sort of wider capabilities for visualization, for optimization, and for sort of generating actions and triggers in there as well. And there are already multiple libraries available, so that those libraries can be shared, accessed, pulled in, and reused in your hub as well. So if we look at that, we're seeing basically every sort of person you speak to in different industries, and the way we see our language is growing, it is the future for data analysis, for data management on there. So just a quick sort of screenshot again of the Data Hub, looking at the capabilities in there for the R language, the scripting there as well. Obviously, knowing R and being able to program in it gives you much more flexibility with what these sort of data sets and what you can do with that data as well. However, obviously, over time, as more sort of information, more usability comes into the hub itself, libraries will be expanded and developed to contain some of the most common features that happen. And again, as sort of global needs change, as the industry changes and research and methodologies change, there may be different sort of libraries that are needed to be updated, different aspects that need to be pulled into there. But you're always going to be able to have a scripting area where those that have sort of knowledge of R can change any of the libraries, adapt them, adopt them, grab them from any of the open source areas that are out globally there, and pull those into the system here as well. And again, I'm just sort of leaving a brief screenshot here of the survey we conducted for the CASRO, and the sort of the language that was used to convert all of those postcodes into the regions and map them in a heat map showing different areas and what their aspects were towards, so how their feelings were towards the Brexit. So if we're looking at sort of, again, looking at the data flow, so in the hub, as we said, all of that data can be managed, it can be merged, it can be manipulated automatically according to any rules that you may have set. So what we're looking at, as we saw before, was all of the information being fed into the hub, and then in addition, once you've got that data in there, you're then looking at a rules engine. You're looking at a way of processing and managing that information, and that engine is there really to decide on what information you're going to pull from these different sources into which data sets, how you're going to manipulate that so you get that marrying of data up in a usable format. And really this is to sort of increase and improve the efficiency of that process of getting all your data together, so that the amount of times that we see in traditional research areas where perhaps one of the sort of data flows, one of the information areas have changed. So social media, as we see in the example here, it's continuously changing the amount of feeds that are coming in, the amount of counts of people that have sort of mentioned a specific word or brand, or all of those are particularly changing. And if for example you wanted to change the time frame you're looking at for that data, once you'd already sort of pulled in that information traditionally, you'd have to then go back and sort of rerun queries on social media time there as well. Once it's using sort of the rules engine, you can just change a few variables, a simple click, and it will already rerun all of that sort of collection of data emerging into your data set that you want to use for publications or reportings. So it really is trying to optimize and automate that flow of information and make it easier, quicker, and more manageable for the user to deal with multiple data sources feeding into one. So once you've sort of obviously you've collected your data, we've done some management with it, we've got it in a process there. We want to be able to use that data. We want to do something with it, report with it, do different areas on there as well. So what we're looking at in here is having the data pushed in real time out to various different devices on there. So it can go to multiple reports at the same time. So one data feed can feed multiple different data reports, perhaps filtered for the different access rights that someone's got to see different data and information there as well. But it also means that once that sort of changes in the data set are happening, they are pushing out into those different reports simultaneously and updating those reports all at one time. So you've got a continuous stream of up-to-date information into a report that's being provided to either your client or clients of clients, internal users, however you need that to be. So really what you're doing, you're delivering the access to this information. You're delivering all of this information, but you're not delivering that static data. It's not one data set that is presented to someone that sits in perhaps an Excel sheet. It is a dynamic update of data continuously. So your data is always in real time, it's always up to date on there as well. So if we're looking at, again, the sort of the data flow on there, so your data can be sourced, derived and calculated continuously and output there. So what you're looking at there is obviously the previous information we've seen on here as well. So everything goes into the data hub. We've got all that data collected and managed in there. And then you can put this out to perhaps, update your CRM system, set it out to different reports, different sort of data exports on there as well, or perhaps have it going out to dashboards in real time, so all progress across multiple surveys can be seen. You can start looking at that sort of whole connections and trying to find insights into the different data, and maybe discovering new things that promotes more questions, more topics for further surveying research. Having various different data sources being merged in and being able to look at those in a quick fashion and always see it, any changes that come out may provoke more questions. And so if that's continuously happening, it means you can get into a cycle of continuous collection, refinement and survey, and recycle that back in shorter time spans than is sort of possible in our standard processes. And obviously sort of pushing data. At the moment, we can push data directly into SPSS. This means instead of running a sort of scheduled export on there, there's a continuous connection to your sort of SPSS data, and all of those sort of updates, the variables, the metadata is continuously fed in there, so that as soon as you open up your sort of SPSS version there, you've got the most up-to-date information. It can be pushed out into sort of dashboards on there, so either sort of third-party tools where you're just populating the data to them through push or pull web services, APIs on there as well, into sort of equity reporting software. But also the R language contains many aspects in there, many abilities to conduct visualization, to actually take the data that you have and present it in various different sort of graphs, bar charts, all the types of sort of dashboarding, visual aspects and reporting that you can think of. It is all customizable using R language, which is when we're referring to that previously in the R and how that can influence and manipulate the data there as well. It also has a visualization aspect, so it's also something that is probably gaining more momentum than SPSS at the moment, and that's why we see other industries it's taking over. We can also push data into sort of Office applications, obviously via sort of the standard exports, CSV, text, Excel, pushing in that information there as well. But in Google Sheets and Office 365, which are online suites, you then have that natural feed into those areas as well. You can see that if you open up a Google Sheet, there's a continuous connection to the data set. It will rerun that sort of query to pull the information and pull that information at the latest time. And if you've developed any sort of graphs and charts and tables off that, naturally they're going to be updated with that information as well. Same with Office 365. So this gives you a more dynamic way of working with live data into Office applications. So if you're preparing your presentations, preparing any reports, all that information, whenever you open it, is always going to be up to date and set there. And then obviously, as we said, it can write into other information systems there, looking at pushing it into CRM systems. So if someone has updated their address in one survey, you can then mirror that out, push that into the CRM system and update that information there as well. If you're looking at sort of certain help desk systems, and perhaps you're getting Twitter feeds coming in complaining about a certain aspect of a product, that may be useful information to be able to then feed back into different help desk systems for either panelists that are taking part in things, and you can see whether there's going to be an influence on some of the information that may be coming in from your panelist into your panel help desk. You've got that feed in there to be able to really help your customers, your staff deal with any of the complaints, deal with any of the systems that may or may not have happened. So all of those sort of different areas, and obviously pushing information out into websites. There's HTML capabilities within the R language, within the database, within the hub, to be able to push out that information into various websites and perhaps display some sort of graphs, charts, information onto those that is in real time and updating continuously for you. So we've talked about having that information out there in real time, and obviously we said time is the biggest invalidator of information. Information is only relevant, only very informative if it's time specific. So just a bit of a fun quote here. So rather pro-European, certainly want a European community where one can. And this feeds in from sort of part of the Brexit study we were looking at on here as well. Now, if you look at that, you can think, well, yep, this is really of today, of this time. If I give additional information that this is something that's said by sort of Boris Johnson, who wants to leave Europe at the moment, and you can see there's a conflict in what he actually said here as well, then that gives extra information on what's happening. So the time I tell you this, and then if I say it's 1997, you can see that, well, yeah, this is no longer relevant to the conversation that's being had today, and just having that extra information on when this was stated really sort of, it now makes this statement, this initial sort of piece of information, invalid. It's no longer relevant to the debate that was going on. So really want to just highlight that having your information in real time, being able to process that and use that, is what the hub is trying to do for you. It's trying to have those feeds continuously so that you can get the most dynamic, most up-to-date information and gain insights from that. So here's just some of the sort of data visualization. I've mentioned the Brexit thing in here as well, and we sort of had day 1 to 7 on the left-hand side, and then sort of 7 to 14 on the right-hand side. And this was really looking at a heat map of responses and how passionate people felt about the whole sort of European debate. Now, obviously, if you do a survey at one time and you get that static information in there, you'll have one of these two maps, which could be quite different. If you're getting continuous feed, you can see how things are changing, how time is adapting, and you can relate those different times to any event that may have happened, then you have a much stronger message, and you can really see what is being useful, what is making a difference to the way perceptions and information of those that you wish to survey are changing. So it really helps having that sort of continuous data flow there. Now, we've talked about sort of having that data out there and how that works. And we're sort of really, what we have to look at is the control of that. Who can access that data? How can they see it? And what you're looking at really is a central control. Different subsets of those data can be assigned to various different users, so that whilst you maybe have one derived data set that you're working from, you want to report to, the overview, top level view that goes out in a sort of quick dashboard can be assigned to certain users, but from that same data set there may be other users that are looking at more of the granular detail. They want to get down into the actuality of the information you have there as well. And so as it's sort of all being pushed out in real time, accessed in real time and continuously, then you no longer have this sort of multiple versions. There's no longer sort of an email that goes out with one attachment that goes to several different people, and then when you want to rerun that, you sort of send out another email, but perhaps Joe in one certain company missed that email and is still working off an old data set. That no longer happens. Your data is securely held in a central repository, and you give access to the sort of distribution of it. You don't give access to the data. So the data stays centralized and it's fed into the systems out there. So everyone can access, sort of pull the information they require it, view it, visualize it, and see what's happening there. But you have control of that central, and you can obviously switch off anyone's access at any time, so that you can manage when people are able to view that data, when they're, if they're sort of paying for a certain length of time of access to view certain information, you can switch that off, and you have that centralized control to not, for a a user, regardless of what package they're using to do any analysis, that you can turn off that control, that access to that data. So it really means that having that information becomes much more fluid, much more dynamic, and it means that you retain the control over it. You really know sort of when that information is passed out and is up to date. So the whole workflow process of getting information, pulling in different collected data, automating the process of managing it, manipulating it, and then using that data, pushing it out in real time continuously, means that the insights, the information that respondents are seeing, that your clients are seeing, is very dynamic, very up to date, and you've reduced a lot of that reprocessing that always used to happen. You know, if a change occurs in a feed at one end, it automatically will change and update the report that's being visualized at the other end of the workflow. You no longer have to reprocess that information, rerun any of the calculations, rerun any of the exports and delivery mechanisms. It is just one continuous flow of information, but in a controlled manner. So just to kind of recap briefly on the actual Data Hub on there, some of the features that are in there as well. The effectiveness of it. You always have the right data available in the right format. So any of the information you want, you've already sort of set up your data sets, your sub-data sets, your exports on there as well. It's already going to be coming out for multiple use, reusability as well, so that, you know, if you've got historical data and you want to do some comparisons on there, they're always going to be in there. You can always reuse that and manipulate it, and with date timestamps on there as well, you can then, you know, even pull in historical data from other sources and start matching that up, giving you a very effective way of managing your data. You have your sort of efficiencies there, you know, easy access to the right data immediately. You said any of that information that's flowing in is always up to date. It's always of the moment. So it means that you don't have to do all this sort of manual reprocessing of information and data. It's continuously flowing, continuously updating, which means the errors are reduced there. There's less error for someone to go in. You know, you've written your sort of rules once. Those rules then continue throughout the lifespan of the data that you're delivering. You don't have to change them or alter them because of a change in any of the data that's coming in. That's being manipulated for you. The insights you can gain, you can now get real-time insight from, you know, the amount of data that's coming, the amount of information that's available, being able to process that and give real insights is obviously going to be a sort of a challenge in itself. But having all of that data merged into a set and being able to view various different derived data sets from them and gain real insights and have those insights updating so you can track the differences over time. You can see if there are real influences. That whole insight and information flow means that you open up multiple channels of value to your clients. You're able to be able to sort of in real time say, well, whatever you did, you know, an hour ago has worked. Continue doing that. That's the sort of type of feedback you want. You don't want to be spending sort of, you know, billions on setting up a new product and throwing it out into the market, and as soon as it goes out, loads of information comes in that says no, it was useless, it missed the whole point. You want to be able to do these in step processes. You want to be able to give that feedback. You want to see that any changes you make really have a real-time impact and be able to then adjust it. So getting into more of the sort of agile way of working, having an agile methodology in your research process to be able to provide really short, quick feedback loops and development and adjustment of your research. But obviously always being secure, always ensuring that that security is there, that information is held and managed correctly, properly, and maintained. You know, we know that security is a really high agenda item. The amount of times we see, you know, things about people having their accounts hacked and leaked, and the sort of whole holding of personal information. It's a very sort of strategic thing there, and obviously when you're sort of pulling in data from various different data sources, if you have set up the rules to not pull in that personal information, perhaps to use a unique identifier for a person rather than holding their personal information in the database, you limit the capabilities of that data being personal information being accessed on there, and managing who can access which parts of data also means that you're only giving a control that you centrally can manage to the people for parts of data they need and parts of the data that's being held in there as well. If your survey data contains information on someone's email, that does not have to be fed back into the hub, so you can keep that in a secure survey, keep that outside, but then the data you'd like to report on, that could be pushed back in the hub and then managed from there and looked at in a sort of a more controlled fashion. So where do we see the future of sort of looking at this data hub on there as well? Well, as we said, we're looking at really enabling an agile research approach. You're really looking at, because you're having so much time-specific data being fed into it, being able to react to that, your research becomes more agile. You refine the questions, you refine the surveys, you refine the information, the research you're conducting continuously. Every time something happens, an event changes, it can lead to extra sort of areas of research that you may not have even thought at when the project was first defined. If you're seeing that there's a spike of a certain type of person at a certain time, you can then do more research on that. You can investigate that further. You can change perhaps the survey you're looking at, the questions you're asking, the target audience, where you're putting your efforts there. All of those can be sort of altered and manipulated in a much quicker fashion because your data is instantaneous, because you're able to sort of see changes and view them over time frames. You can be more reactive responses, and obviously the more you're able to do that and provide that to your clients, the more value is generated for them and ultimately for you. If your client is able to see exactly what's happening, what feedback they're getting in real time, and being able to then adjust their own processes for that because of the research has indicated that's what they should be doing, it means that they're able to react themselves, and that could be this, the difference in their own sort of product success failure, their brand success failure as well. So having the quicker cycles in there, being more agile, being more beneficial to that, then that's something you can really do in, and be a sort of a future thinking research agency. And then if you think of the sort of the connectors, the possibilities that are out there, there's going to be areas where you can do sort of really crazy analysis, looking at perhaps sort of when the Internet of Things comes out and your fridge is feeding back information on that you're running out of milk to you. Well, hey, if you're collecting that, and then you're collecting also the information from the stores and from geolocations, and finding out which store someone goes to collect their milk and why, and do they buy it in advance or do they do it sort of only at the last minute, and what type of person does that. You can imagine that the sort of the real future insights where you can become almost instantaneously responding in a sort of a just-in-time fashion to every action that's happening in the world, in the globe, and reporting on that, doing research on it, giving the insight as to why that may be happening, and enabling people to readjust their positioning of their marketing, their strategies. It just it's beyond sort of my comprehension at the moment of exactly where we can go on here, but the possibilities and the information availability out there is phenomenal, and it's a future I'm very keen to see. So that's been the end of the sort of the webinar here today. Obviously, we've looked at what the sort of Nebu Data Hub is, how we can utilize and manage data, get the most out of the data sets on there as well. Future webinars will be looking more at the actual product itself. We'll be sort of planning our next webinar in a month's time, and we'll be showing you sort of more of how you actually use the hub, how you conduct some of the aspects of the webinar we've talked about and discussed this morning. But if there's any extra questions, and yep, certainly, yeah. There are some sort of videos and fact sheets on the hub already on our YouTube channel, which will give you a bit more information on there as well. So check that out. As are some previous webinars also available on that YouTube channel as well. Obviously, if you do need more information on the hub, would like to discuss those aspects further, that will be, you can contact any contact you have at Nebu, that they'd be willing to help you on there as well. Okay, R language, yes, it is a sort of scripting language on there at the moment. There are quite a few sort of different websites on there saying about how R can be used, how it can be scripted, giving examples of these different scripts, and yet admittedly it is a sort of a new programming language that will have to be learnt, but looking at different sort of examples, the amount of job adverts, vacancies that are now advertising for knowledge of R within the research industry, I think that it's inevitable that this is going to become the sort of the de facto system that's going to be used, de facto language for analysis on there as well. We see increases in not only the sort of the job adverts out there as well, but there's multiple different sites on there that are looking at the differences between sort of R and some of perhaps SAS and SPSS and other analytical languages on there, and R really has grown up to be the sort of the lead, and looks to be the future lead. But yeah, as I mentioned, we will be looking at sort of having different libraries in the database, in the hub, so that you can see and reuse those themselves, and sort of don't have to have as much programming language on there. But yeah, certainly having experience of R will expand the capabilities and the interactions that you can perform within not only sort of the hub here, but in your own analytical tools, in the way you present your information, your data. Yep, certainly we'll be showing the product. Again, as I said, we'll be showing the product in more detail. It was sort of launched at the Casro Tech, so our product manager Emil was there, and Eric, that pretty much everyone knows, and the two guys there presented exactly what the sort of the software was, and we've launched that there. So we're starting to sort of roll that out with some new first use clients, get their feedback, and start the development there. And as we've mentioned about sort of having agile insights into the systems, into the use of the hub as well. We'll also be doing that for our own development, getting that feedback, continuously altering and changing and updating that, adding on new data feeds that are requested by clients, pulling in different information sources, changing and updating the R libraries, and having those as continuous improvements, developments in there, so that the product in itself matches that continuous churn of information available that's there. Okay, well, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation this morning. There is a sort of a repeat of the webinar this afternoon for those that may miss it, and naturally the recording of this will be available on the YouTube, on our YouTube channel, so that you can review it or share those links with other people. So once again, I'd like to thank everyone for being with us this morning, and wish you all a good day. Thank you.